Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Robert Hannon, and tonight, as you all know, I'll be talking with Matt Atkinson. But before I begin, if you have a cell phone, please silence it or put it on airplane mode. At UAF, we acknowledge the Alaska Native nations upon whose ancestral lands the campuses reside. In Fairbanks, our Troth-Yadat campus is located on the ancestral lands of the Dana people of the lower Tanana River. This event and others in the Tall Timbers Series are being webcast. And if you want to pose questions for future guests, you can just go to that website, tap on the link to Summer Sessions webpage, and you'll be able to find past episodes there as well. Usually they're posted about 2 weeks after the event. And the Tall Timber Series is really Summer Sessions in UAF's way to acknowledge the important individuals who've made a difference in our community. And it's generously supported by Explore Fairbanks. So one of the guys we're celebrating is Matt Atkinson. So let me introduce him. He's a Fairbanks native and an ardent hockey enthusiast. He played for 2 United States Hockey League teams, the Rochester Mustangs and the Dubuque Fighting Saints. In 1986, Matt and 2 Fairbanks college friends developed a business plan for their summer employment: small group tours by van to the Arctic Circle. Northern Alaska Tour Company was born and expanded to northern camps for polar bear viewing and even more outhouses and gravel roads. This summer, only business expanded to year-round when winter trips were added with aurora viewing, and they partnered with Sukapak to include remote camps at Coldfoot, Dead Horse, and along the Yukon River. In 2012, the business expanded with the purchase of Warbelow Airlines for Denali flight seeing and more. And today, 35 years later, the award-winning business is thriving as it expands and continues to make significant contributions to the Fairbanks economy. So please welcome Matt Atkinson. So Matt, you were born in Fairbanks. Your mom's dad was pastor at Zion Lutheran Church, and your dad's family was drawn to Fairbanks for work at the Carnation Dairy outfit. So you have some roots in this community.
Yeah, I certainly do. It started way back. I think my mom went to Denali Elementary School, and Dad worked on the pipeline here, so it goes back way long time.
Way.
Yeah, we were in Anchorage for a little bit and then came back, and I think Wood River was an expansion school for the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, and the first week or so we sat on the floor waiting for desks and books. I don't know what they did with us.
Well, so what are some of the early memories you have of Fairbanks?
Oh, at Fairbanks? Well, earliest on, I think we were, before we had moved down to Anchorage, my grandparents lived over on Park Drive. I think Mom lived on Sunset. Remember my grandpa took me to the Botel to have a Roy Rogers early on. And we still go there occasionally for a Roy Rogers or a Shirley Temple, something like that. And then moving to Anchorage, we were there. We went to Chinook Elementary School, and that's where I first saw some guys playing hockey on the outdoor rink there near Diamond High School.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, now your mom worked for Wien Airline, and given your future business endeavors, do you think there was some romance about aviation that was instilled with that?
I think it helped. You know, when we started to expand a little bit and wanted to introduce ourselves to other markets, one of the key things there is to be able to shorten the day. So rather than going all ground tour, so how you do that is by getting into aviation. So first we chartered with a lot of companies. We worked with Alaska Airlines and interfaced with, first Mark Air, then Alaska Airlines. So I always knew a lot of those people from being a kid out at Fairbanks International. And I think my biggest adventure was walking from Rosy Creek to the airport one day. Just got bored. Remember that? I think I got there just about in time for her to get off work, but it was a good day. So knew a lot of people there. And then the real kicker, though, for us was just we chartered for a long time, and then when we ended up purchasing aircraft and getting into that portion of it, it was kind of a natural to lean into that part of it.
Well, I'm guessing, too, that airline connection was pretty good when you started traveling for hockey.
Yeah, definitely. Went non-rev a few times, got bumped in every airport in North America.
Now, do you remember exactly how you fell in love with hockey or how that all began?
Yeah, like I said, I saw those guys playing outside at the rink in Anchorage and thought that was pretty interesting because we would cross-country ski, and I think she would take us down ice skating sometime. Saw these guys in the gear and thought that was kind of neat. And then a friend of mine's brother was on that team, and then seeing the flyer in Fairbanks here at Wood River, thought that would be kind of fun. And then first season, I think you had a draft question of that, but John Klupnik was our first coach in Mount McKinley Animal Hospital. Kurt Franklin was on that team, Heidi Klupnik, others that are still around. And the kind of the key was with going into the airline thing and have a non-rev, at that time you could put a 10-year-old on a plane by himself and send him to Seattle to some unknown strangers for a couple weeks of hockey camp. And that's what we did, and it worked out well. That was kind of a kickstart, yeah, because it was a kickstart, and that wasn't so common at the time. So came back with a newfound set of skills, and that next year was, quite a bit better.
Yeah, and carrying all that gear too. Yeah, you had to make friends quickly.
Yeah.
Now I know through our friend Randy Zarnke about your background, but you were spurred to play by a flyer.
Yeah, they used to have before the internet, they had paper that stuff was printed out on, and
this is
they'd
before
do like a bulletin board, or they'd pass them out at class or something.
Now, something I read about you, I think it was by Randy, reminded me of something Steve Frank said about basketball. That as a kid, he was just spending all his free time just practicing. He loved it so much, and he would just drill and drill and drill. Sounds like you had a similar approach.
Yeah, it was fun. And so in getting some of that early hockey school training, you learned how to do off ice things. And then I think in middle school, we had a string there where Mark Cridge and Craig Stevens would shoot on me. So we would walk down, Mom would drop off my gear at the rink. I would walk from Ryan down to the Dipper. And we had I think it was 40 days or something like that. So if we didn't have a practice or a game, we'd go there and skate after school. Mm-hmm. Some of those days were really cold too. The best was, just for principle, I think it was pretty close to 50 below, and when we broke the puck, then we went home.
That was a sign. And I always think goalie is the most pressured position on any team, because there are the moments when it's just on you. And so how did you end up in that position?
I didn't know any better. As a first-year player, Coach, John Klupnik asked, and I said, sure, okay. And then later, getting an aptitude, that's kind of fun to be, hopefully make a difference in the game. But probably the goalie mom is the hardest position on the team. I've coached kids before where the mom couldn't even watch the game.
Whoa. And is it true at 14 you were playing with the Gold Kings?
Yeah, so Roger McKinnon was our Bantam coach, and Billy Duquette was the legendary goalie, of course, with the Gold Kings, but he didn't have a backup for much of that season. So Roger would have me come practice, and that was another thing. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for bringing me, because those are usually late practices, 9 o'clock or something like that, get over at 10. But that was a kickstart getting to play with, Chuck Cartier, John Haddad, all of those guys. And then for a good portion of that season, Roger would have me play backup for the Gold Kings. So Billy would play, and then just one time he did put me in a game. We were up a little bit, and so I think we played against the Bonneville Pontiacs.
That must have been exciting, though, huh?
Oh yeah, that gets your attention. It got my heart racing. It wasn't a planned event. As Roger would do, he'd tip down his hat, say, "Matty, get ready, next shift." So then you find yourself in there and got some shots, got scored on a couple times, but it worked out okay. We still won.
Yeah. Well, now, and at some point you mentioned coaches, Rick Tarkinian.
Yeah, Richard Tarkinian and Tark.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in high school, well, he was always a legendary coach, and then when we started going to West Valley, we had him for not only a hockey coach but a AP Bio teacher. So Lee Keniston, who's in the audience, was in that class, and we had all of our good buddies were there. But as a coach, he was just flamboyant, a character, and just was he brought something to the game that was different from a Roger McKinnon or my coaches and juniors, just something like that. He was passionate and really built up leaders on the team. And I think his real strength, not only on the ice, was just having that locker room culture. That was great.
Yeah, I bet. Well, when you eventually coached, are there elements of his influence or other coaches you had that came into play?
Well, I think you take a little bit from everybody. So Roger McKinnon obviously is a huge influence. Richard Tarkinian, Mark Ostapina was a coach I had prior in juniors. Frank Serratori, who coaches at the university, coaches at Air Force right now, and then USA Hockey does a great job of, because coaching now is a lot different than it was then.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about the hockey league, and was it just a natural decision to join that league and play in those teams?
Well. Yeah, at a certain point, it's about exposure. So at that time, it was kind of a pivotal year where the rules changed. So going into the senior year of high school in Fairbanks here, there was no, because you could always play competitive, and we'd play a comp league like USA Hockey and then high school, two different things. And the rules were going into in the springtime that if you're over a certain age, USA Hockey is done, and so all that would be left was high school or juniors. So kind of on the trajectory I was going is I had gone down and was going to some national camps and made the Dubuque team and committed to that. And then by the end of the summer, they changed the rules. So I could have stayed, and I probably would have if we had known that, but I was already down that other path. And my teammates still to this day give me a hard time about leaving. Every year.
What are some of the standout memories of those years for you?
Of heading out and going to juniors. Again, This is a different deal. Now there's, much more, there's online school and kids kind of go away earlier. But yeah, showing up to, with a suitcase and a hockey bag to a place you'd never been before, and getting enrolled in it, actually physically having to go to a different high school and learn that was a big eye-opener. Yeah. The other thing, I was really looking forward to better eating corn in Iowa. I learned about feed corn. I just thought you'd be able to walk down the street and pick corn off there. I was really looking forward to corn on the cob, but it just didn't pan out that way.
Yeah, like people expect to see igloos when they come up to Alaska, right?
Right.
That's right.
Yeah, so that was, and looking back now, it was all fine at the time, but then, halfway through that season, I got loaned to another team. So it's kind of transactional in that league, so it was...
Do they consult with you before they...
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. It was I don't know if my parents knew. So middle of the year, I got on a bus, again, this is just by yourself, 17. Got on a bus from Dubuque to Rochester and met some other player there and checked into their house, and then had to figure out how to get into the school the next day. So I spent time at John Marshall High School in Rochester, which...
That sounds hysterical. Well, but when you went to college in San Diego, you ended up playing against Kings, right?
Yeah, kind of a little bit different deal. So I ended up, it was, the goal was to play Division I. So I was offered a Division I scholarship at a place called U.S. International. It was a Division I independent school, and Brad Buteau was our coach, and he had coached with at University of Minnesota prior to that with Herb Brooks of the '80 Olympics. So he was, it brought some stuff. They were building a program there, but after my first year, the program folded. But we were on whatever scholarship you had at the time, you were able to maintain. So I had was on a full ride, and there was about a third that graduated, about a third that transferred, and a third of us stayed behind. Now, at the same time, my girlfriend, now wife at the time, was just up the road in LA, so that did factor into a little bit of my decision.
Yeah.
Carrie Scullion at the time, now Carrie Atkinson. She's listening in Homer, maybe.
So what about playing against the Gold Kings, though? You're
Yeah,
kind
so
of avoiding that end.
No, so there was we played there was kind of a precursor to, it's kind of a semi-pro league, I guess you'd call it, a West Coast League team. And so we, a lot of us, and there were some other kind of guys that are kicking around San Diego area that played for a team called the San Diego Surf. And so we played a couple times. We had road trips up here against the Gold Kings, and that was strange playing against all the guys that I practiced and grew up with playing against. And I don't think we beat them. I'm pretty sure we didn't win up here. But we had good games, and it was kind of a novelty. So it was fun to come home. It was it wasn't a free trip home. We had to pay our own tickets, but it was great to be back in the Dipper and show the California boys around. And most of them were in California, but everybody's from Minnesota or Canada or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, I want to turn to the entrepreneurial side of your career and talk about the birth of your company.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to be just summer employment, right?
Well, initially, I mean, there was even the proto version. We had Ben Roth, who's still, he should be up here too one of these times for a whole range of things. And then Jeff Brown, who is Dr. Brown's son. And they didn't want him, they wanted him to go on to other things. So he's a petroleum economist in Dubai, not being scrapping around with this tourism stuff. So they were involved early on, starting out too, with summertime where we would park the bus at Bob and Cam's tennis court off of Muskox, and then go back to school. And I think Cam probably took messages off the answering machine and took a book of people that were interested in doing just Arctic Circle tours. So Brett Carlson had worked at the with what is now Explore Fairbanks Convention and Visitors Bureau at the Log Cabin Visitor Center downtown. And at that time, there was just a lot of people that wanted to travel north. RV travel was big, but they didn't want to bring these nice big RVs north up this road that they didn't know if there was going to be fuel, and they heard it was going to break your windshields and give you flat tires and all that. So that was the initial niche, was providing one-day ground tours from Fairbanks to the Arctic Circle and back for a lot of the rubber tire traffic. Because there are people that we're up here 3 or 4 days, and there's not a lot of people that have a 16-hour have time for a 16-hour ground tour up to the Arctic Circle. So
drawing that business plan together, though, so you had to figure out a dependable vehicle, what you did. I mean, talk me through that kind of thinking out the process.
Well, I think in Lee Keniston, who's here, and is one of so Lee and Brett and I now are standing. The initial part was just sourcing a van, and Ford E350s were the model. I think that van is still in Anaktuvik, and getting a loan. And like the thought was that if it didn't work, then you couldn't pay off the loan, then don't go back to school and get a job and pay off the loan. And but it worked out all right. And then there was a iteration with very early on the recognition that you need some economies of scale would be a little bit better. So there was then you get a small bus, and that didn't work out, that particular vehicle, and got another bus, and now we have many coaches, and I think we've got it figured out in a lot of vans as well.
I'll bet you did. But you'd have to have mechanical skills. You identified many of the major things that foil many people's just driving up the Hall Road is multiple flat tires, shattered windshields, all of that.
Yeah, I think so. This wouldn't be possible to have some 18, 19-year-olds starting out and doing this. There's insurance and things like, which we always had, but I think just a lot of our life experience growing up as kids in Alaska, that we learned about maintenance kits and spare tires, and even early on we had radio telephone that would tie in with the pipeline system. It was a Radio Fairbanks deal that patched in through where you could call into Fairbanks or something. So that was something that people didn't have. of course, CB radio for communications. So we kind of stacked the deck in that way, and then operating very conservatively was early on. We learned that's important too.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, talk to me about some of these early people who took the tours. You're obviously identified just a specific type, but were some of them nervous? Were they all just gung-ho types, not worried about what would happen? Or?
So the very first guest would have been, like I said, RV travelers. So already that's going to be kind of a niche to where they're comfortable at least to hop in a rig and drive 4,000 miles to Alaska. So that would pre-qualify that. But that was really the pre-qualification. And then once we got into grounded air combination excursions and things like that, our target market has always been kind of a mainstream traveler. So not necessarily gung-ho or backcountry or adventure or extreme. It would be kind of tame for that. So we're doing a wilderness sightseeing excursion, and what we learned early on too is to tell a story, because there's a lot of themes that develop there, and we incorporate video on board the coaches as well. And a lot of it is to make a meaningful, good experience out of what would otherwise could be a long, tedious day. So we're incorporating a homestead lifestyle, Yukon River culture and native culture. Pipeline story was a big part of it. Arctic tundra and the environmental factors, and then some entertainment as well.
Yeah. You want to share any of that entertainment life right now? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, not putting you on the spot.
That's the 30%.
It's a long drive, so there are plenty of times. Well, now as the business expanded, though, not everybody is gifted who might be a great driver, might be a great mechanic, know their way out, but not so good on storytelling. So when you went to expand the business, what did you look for in some of the new people you brought on board?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the first year when we kind of after college, when we decided, okay, let's try to grow this, that's when we incorporated the air transportation into it. So we conceived of a ground tour where you'd ground tour north above the Arctic Circle, fly back to Fairbanks, and of course when you use that plane, we'd have the same fly up and ground tour back. So you're using the van both ways, the plane both ways. We started wholesaling Mark Air excursions to Barrow, and then would do a multi-day excursion to Prudhoe Bay. So there was kind of a lot going on to try to just offer more things to more people. And that's when we did need to have guides to help out, because prior to that we had a sophisticated rotation system of guiding. You'd guide one day, I think rest a little bit the next day, and then you'd answer the phones and purchase food for picnics, and then you'd guide the next day. And guiding would be ground touring north, getting back into town, dropping people off at the RV parks, hitting the car wash on University Avenue, and then a gas station, fueling up, and then getting it ready for the next guy the next day. There's probably duty times that wouldn't work anymore. So we had to change that. When we started hiring people, we were hiring for people that were good with people, and that were interested in the region. And then we would train for the other aspects as far as operating on the road and things like that. And the training early on consisted of ride-alongs, because we had developed a narrative and a story that was kind of in a tribal knowledge type of a deal. And then now that's become much more, and we have great help from Michelle Charlton and Robert Whedon, who have been with us for a long time, and have a guide's guide to the Dalton Highway. So what we try to do now is have, about 70% of it to where a guide doesn't have to think about it. So they're gonna know what you're gonna do at a certain place and what you're gonna say and how to set things up. And then the rest of the 30% is for one's own interest or knowledge or particular area of expertise. But that just makes it easier. So you don't have to worry about that part or thinking about, what am I gonna say here? What are we gonna do here? We try to have that laid out.
Yeah. Now, tourism and the airline industry are pretty volatile, as we've known for the last decade or so. And so I'm wondering a little bit about how you anticipate some of the fluctuations and what it was like As you expanded the operation and took over an airline and expanded that piece of it, how did the larger aspects of the industry work for you? And was it a challenge? I guess what I'm thinking about here is that oftentimes there are established players in an industry, and the newcomer, nice to see you, but kind of standoffish. How was it on the sort of economic side in that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I saw that ahead of time, and yeah, I think we're blessed, in the travel and visitor industry in broadly, that the concept of cooperative destination marketing is key, and locally, I think we get along very well too. So we've always benefited greatly from participation in affinity organizations. So particularly Fairbanks Convention and Visitors Bureau at the time, the Alaska Visitors Association. So we all have the common goal of trying to generate a message and awareness to bring people to Alaska, then bring people to Fairbanks. So then once we have a market that's going to come here, we can kind of compete against that. But generally, it's been very favorable, and those relationships with others in the industry, whether they're selling tours or providing other vendor services or things like that, has been really positive. And I think that that's the cooperative marketing element brings cooperation in a lot of other things. And I think even in airline aspect, which can be a little bit more competitive in a way, that when it comes to operations, everybody's very cooperative. And we've always seen ourselves, we do what we do, and there may be others that share markets, but we don't have any competitors. We just do what we do and let the chips where they fall, and kind of focus on those things we can control.
Well, before we talk about COVID and some of the ups and economic challenges that have taken place in the larger, the country as a whole, you talk about marketing. That must have changed radically since those early days.
Yeah, that's a good point. Remember how they said they used to print things on paper, and
yeah,
so we
right.
would use rack card brochures. We would try to have, and Lee Keniston, one of our partner, he does more operations now, but he was an early guerrilla marketer, which would consist of having rack cards any conceivable place you could put a rack card in Fairbanks. We had posters. We would have flyers. We weren't beyond putting a flyer in the handle of a RV door if we needed to. So that was a big part of it. And then print advertising, the Fairbanks Visitors Guide, which would have been put out would have been, now it's Explore Fairbanks. The Alaska Visitors Association had the vacation planner, which would be sent out, and a big one was the milepost.
Sure.
So print advertising, we try to have everywhere and try to be very strategic about it. And the planning timeline is different. Now it's internet-based and websites, and we probably have a little bit of work to do that on our social media and that kind of thing. And
yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I mean, as you grow, let's talk about then the acquisition period when you decided you chartered, as you mentioned. When did you, and how hard was it, the decision to acquire?
Well, it kind of even went back before that a little bit. So we had been going along a few years and kind of developing a market for multi-day excursions, day tours. Kind of started to work with some of the cruise tour companies and larger companies to do bigger groups, which is great, but probably the first thing that we did that was a little bit different was a place where we were overnighting for our multi-day excursions to Prudhoe Bay. Was Coldfoot Camp. So that was something that we needed a place for our people to stay. And so Coldfoot was, I guess even prior to that, there's a little trading post 60 miles out of town that we'd worked with the Carlson family up there. And we kept my cousin Beth Gray on the brink of insanity for about 2 seasons out there, holding down the fort by herself, cleaning outhouses and hosting guests. So that was kind of our first land-based acquisition up at Joy, Alaska, and then Coldfoot. So that was Coldfoot Camp was was being sold by Sourdough Fuel at the time, and they were going to shut it down, but we needed to have a place to stay. So we got involved with that, and it was ended up being a good deal in that, because you jumped right into restaurant, hotel, year-round operations. So that's when Brett started heading north up to the camps. He dove in on that, as did my mother and father-in-law. Red and Val Scullion were the first cooks up there. You know, he's a certified executive chef. So everybody here has had a hand in those things. And then after that, we, for just other reasons, Yukon River Camp came into being, and they were on the tip of the spear with that one. And my son Simon and daughter Miranda spent summers up there with them, picking up rocks on the banks of the Yukon. And then about the same time is when we started getting involved in aviation. And how it came about was, so as far as getting stuff or acquiring things, the camps, the homestead, and then Coldfoot and Yukon River, is at about the same time that what we were doing a lot of at the time was working with Frontier Flying Service. So they were kind of the main charter outfit. So we got a lot of help from Bobby Hajdukovic, and Craig Kenmuth was his business manager, and I guess we got help from him. Would you say that, Lee? Yeah, probably. And so it was getting to be a little bit much for that model. So the commercial aviation at the time, you wanted to get some mail, get some people, go out, drop them off, come back, and we would come in with this big charter bubble that would kind of throw things off. And we'd have all these people in the lobby, and it kind of was almost a little bit of a conflict. So we got kicked out of the nest. So it wasn't really a choice. Craig said, okay, here's what's going to happen. If you need these seats, you're going to buy these 2 planes. You're going to start your own certificate. You can fly them under our certificate for a year, and then you're out on your own. So we did that. We purchased 2 Piper Chieftains, Piper PA-31 350s, and then we flew under their certificate for a year, and we purchased a building too on the east ramp from them. That came in with one of the planes. It's not really a building, it's some trailers, but if anybody's familiar with the east ramp, it's modular construction is the king out there. And so through that process, and that's where I got very involved with helping write that initial certificate. So we started a 135 charter operation on our own called Air Arctic. And so then we could do our own flying. So that's where we hired a couple pilots early on, had a director of operations and a chief pilot. And as soon as you get 2 planes, especially Navajos, then you need 3. Then if you have 3, you need 4, and so on and so forth.
The reason I'm focusing on that, I'm wondering was there anything that carried over from your early days with a van to later with an aircraft that translated, or was it like a completely different critter?
I think it was a completely different critter. What we had, and we've always kind of been of the ilk that's, rather than, so you want to have a market first and then get the resources
you developed
in
the
place.
Market, right?
So we had a market, and then okay. So before we ever had, so for example, with Air Arctic, when we were getting our chief pilot was doing his initial check ride with the FAA to get a certificate to actually fly. So when Steve Lindsay landed, he passed away, a friend of ours, Father Robert's dad, was our POI at the time, our FAA representative. So as soon as they landed and he signed that paper, we had 9 people get on the plane. I mean, they were waiting in the line, probably a half hour late. Kind of still irritated about that. No, but we build the market and then get the assets to make it work. So before we ever got into Coldfoot Camp, where there's 100 rooms or more, we had a lot of people that needed to spend the night. So not too concerned with the similarities, and they're quite different, but we learned and had good professionals to help us along the way too. Early on with that, in the even Air Arctic days, Darren Young, who's our current director of operations, was there to help with that. And so, call it the Tall Timbers Series, but tall timbers grow in a forest, and as you can see, there's a lot of people that help out.
Yeah, well, of course that, and so much it seems like when you're building, as we talked it before we began, is building relationships and making sure you establish. And every community you go into, you've got to build a relationship.
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah, that was always fun. So we started going into places like, and that's one of our core values too, is trying to, make the places that we visit better, economically or whatnot, or by helping share a story. So we worked with Stevens Village quite a bit, and worked with old Dave Lacey back when he was around, was the manager for Stevens Village, and then with folks in Enochtuvuk Pass early on with the museum, and bringing tour groups up there. Yeah. So that's really important, and that's one of the things that makes it fun too. Over the years, we've just gotten to meet a lot of awesome people, and that's kind of a competitive advantage that you have is kind of sticking to one area and being familiar with it and knowing how things work. So we work with a lot of outside entities that, like, we call them tour wholesalers, that say, hey, or John Hall's Alaska, or places like that. They want to come into a place, but you really need to know what you're doing or know some people, because it's, swing it into Fort Yukon, you better know somebody.
Yeah, you better. Well, and also I'm thinking that many of these communities have such rich stories to tell. They must add to the narratives that you and your colleagues and your fellow workers, as they bring these people north, contribute to.
Yeah, and I think that what we find is that, particularly in Enochtuvuk, that program everything's changed post-COVID and things like that. But yeah, it's helping craft, working with local people to craft a narrative or a story that we know as travel and tourism extras that people want to hear. There's a lot of times people don't really, if you're not used to that industry, you don't know what people are, you don't appreciate the things in your own town. So
Sure.
a lot of times, people, you hear, ask a local, but a lot of times locals don't really know, unless you're in the travel and tourism industry, as far as what people want to do and how to get around and things like that. Because a lot of times, everywhere I go talk to people, it's like, well, how many people live here? It's like, oh, I don't know, well, what do people do? Well, I'm not really sure. So those basic interpretive elements are things that are very important, and if you can craft a story, it can make what could seem mundane very, very interesting.
My wife and I were reflecting. We were at Pioneer Park the other day, and Terrence Cole used to do a bike tour of Fairbanks, and he'd stop in front of Pioneer Park and he says, okay, look around here. What's the oldest thing here? We'd look around and we'd name some building. He said, no, see this rock here? It's 3 million years old, or something like that. You think, But it goes to the I think, element that obviously you're successful, that there's a mystique about Alaska. There's a romance that people who come up here hope to experience. And so you are really trying to realize some of their dreams, even as you inform them about actual life.
Yeah,
it goes on.
Exactly. And we want to have a message out there that appeals broadly. So our guests are those that are willing to head north, which is a niche. So at this point, we stay focused on, Alaska's Arctic, and then we do have operations in Denali National Park too, which we've wanted to do for a long time, and had an opportunity a few years ago to base a couple planes down there for summit flights around the park. But we really want to appeal to as many people as possible. A lot of it now is a function of time, because travel patterns have changed. So if people are going to come into Fairbanks, we want to have an experience that can draw them, and we want to set expectations at a level we can meet or exceed. And that's a very important part of it. And then the interpretation, and we have a couple of our guides, current guides, alumni guides here, and that interpretive element is just so important. Like, I would have loved to go on a Terrence Cole bike tour of A67. Did you know that's what it was called before? Yeah, it was commemorating the 100th anniversary of. Didn't you work
in public? Am I going to say no? I didn't know that. Yeah. I sort of did that.
It was built to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the purchase of Alaska from Russia. And initially there was a zoo there, and had some poor old wolves that would pace around, and a moose, and I think there was a monkey barn or something. So it was quite the deal. Now you know.
Now I know. Well, you mentioned COVID. The tourist industry is volatile then, because economic or political or world events can dramatically change even for a town and a region like Fairbanks in Alaska.
Yeah, we're really tied in, and we were talking about that a little bit as we started. I mean, we have the political risk, which would be something like going back to we were hit very hard during 9/11. You know, travel changed. And then it could be all the way to a local level of political risk of, you know, say the community of Kaktovik decides that they don't want to have people come watch polar bears. So that's that aspect. Economic risk, you know, we're very much exposed to volatile fuel prices. Insurance can ebb and flow. And
Regulations?
You know, regulatory, yep. And then now with the pandemic, that brings I hadn't really thought of that one before, but now we certainly have thought about it because tourism went to zero there pretty much for a little while. So we had to really kind of rein in and toggle in, and luckily with being diversified has been a real blessing for us over the years too. So between the camps, the tourism side, the aviation side, that if one is up, one is down a little bit, you know, you get lucky and there's a construction crew working on something on the Dalton Highway staying at Coldfoot. That's great. Tourism went down, we could toggle in and kind of dig into the aviation side, which has been an adventure. And it very much ties into like the things you hear on the national media as far as supply chain issues are real.
Absolutely.
The human resource, issues are real. Pilot shortage, we're in a little bit different boat up here, but one of the things that we encountered was not knowing what was going to happen or how long it was going to be. You bring the fleet down to a level that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But if you have a plane off insurance for 6 months or more, you have to go through a whole annual event. So you have to do that with every plane, and so you have a maintenance backlog. So to just turn it back on is not really possible.
Yeah.
But we're getting there. We're getting there.
But you must be so, I guess it's sort of like a cliche, but when they talk about being nimble in business and industry, you're discussing exactly that point. When one sector of your operations is dry or it's not got the support, you have to shift and see where you can compensate in other sectors, right? Correct.
Yeah. So we did lean into the aviation side of it. Passenger travel went down there too, because a lot of the villages are really not that far removed from diphtheria or smallpox or other pandemics or epidemics of different, I guess, epidemics at the time. So, but our freight went way up because people still need either critical travel or supplies and things like that. So that's something that we leaned into pretty hard. And then, both good and bad. We have a team that's been with us for a long time. So Erica Weld started as helping get our deli sandwiches together. She's our basically financial controller now. Michelle Charlton and Robert Whedon, Darren Young, all these guys. And so the core team was able to stay in place, and we're able to. There is no they. It's us. So the good thing is we can be nimble, but the bad thing is we better be smart enough to figure it out.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, so talk to me about how this season's shaping up, and what do you see going forward?
Well, we're kind of hopefully coming out of, although it's changing, spiking now, so there's still a fair amount of uncertainty, but it seems like that travel is coming back, and there is pent-up demand that's going to be tricky for industry to have capacity to keep up with that demand. And I think that just as traveling public too, that we just need to realize that that's the case. That some things just may be different, that we have to plan a little further in advance. And it kills us because we've always prided ourselves on being very flexible and scalable. So okay, we need more planes for tonight. We have a plane and a pilot on deck ready to go, but at some point you just have to say no. And I think that's it'll take a little bit to get out of it. I think we're in better shape than you hear about mile-long lines in Amsterdam airports and no new tickets out of London for a week or so. So we don't have a monopoly on any hardships, and I think we're doing pretty well. But the other challenge is going to be, with human resources and getting people to come up. We have had to have develop a whole portion of the business that is travel for coworkers that come up from the lower 48, maybe work here for the summertime, having a place for them to stay, and local transportation. And then that's a recruitment pool for those that want to stay year round. But those are going to continue to be challenges, but it's a good problem to have. I'd rather have that than have no business.
Yeah. Well, turning to more kind of big picture questions, I often wonder, somebody who's a standout in a sport, especially a team sport, whether the skills you learned early on playing hockey translated to running and operating a business. Do you think there are leadership or other kind of skills that you learned early on, Matt?
Oh, I would like to think so. Yeah. That I mean, certainly, I've been spending a lot of time and kind of got thrust into spending time at Utqiagvik here once COVID hit, and certainly there's a lot of parallels there to it's like a new coach coming in and trying to foster the leadership and let everybody do their things that they can do best, but stay back, but provide support and some guidance. And I think there's a lot of parallels, especially in that environment that I've seen here in the last couple of years. But a lot of it is you want to have a plan, whether it's a plan for a practice or a game, and have that plan and try to execute and have the tools in place where, in a sports analogy might be that you've got X amount of hours of practice, or that somebody can do a certain skill, and you put that in place in business all the time. And plus, work ethic too, but that I don't learn how to work hard.
Tell me about that. What?
Well, and I don't think sports has the monopoly on that because,
you have to show up to practice and to play.
Right. Well, showing up is part of it, but we've been Lee and Brett, and there's no harder workers. Brett particularly is just crazy worker, and he that's just a mental thing with him. Maybe Bob and Cam somehow you could elucidate that on that later, but he's next level. Lee also. They have different sports backgrounds, but I think just we love each other and have a goal that we want to do and work towards it.
Yeah. Well, and you talk so much about people who are part of your team, but it was grown out of this community too. So in a real fundamental way, your operation is really a hometown kind of.
Oh, very very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of a neat thing that we don't take for granted. But all of the friends and family that helped out, and our local suppliers, and whether it's shopping at Foodland for potato rolls back in the day, or working with Seekins, or the different Jim Easterling is a mechanic that's worked with us for many years, and now his son, who grew up in our shop, is one of our crackerjack mechanics that can help. Work on generators or loaders or anything you can think of. So, we're working on second generation there.
Well, it's such a different picture often than you think of a successful business model being international, sort of interchangeable executives, or a certain culture of transition. Like you're with a company only so long until you see the next opportunity and you're gone. But it sounds like you cultivate your people and let them grow.
We like continuity and longevity. It's not
doesn't hurt,
possible.
does it?
Huh?
Doesn't hurt.
No, it's great. And then, at times, particularly on the aviation side, we even with pilots, we try to grow pilots up, and after a few years, if there's a great opportunity for a coworker, we're going to be behind that. You want folks to succeed and move on to the next thing, but we like continuity. And a lot of it too is that it's nuanced, and whether you're on the phone or guiding or things like that, it takes time to get good. And then when you get good, it's fun.
Well, the obverse side of that then is you've taken on leadership roles in the tourism industry statewide and what. So do you see future expansion on national level, and you know, the University of Alaska is a land, sea, space grant institution. So they're asteroids to mine, I think.
Yeah, we won't be building any rockets.
Yeah.
Maybe a drone. No, I think we've got a lot of, I think we just want to get better and better. So we've been, one of the things being around a long time, you get opportunities for different things. And you know, it's been helpful for us to kind of stick to at least a regional direction and local. So we have, coming out of pandemic here, getting back all of our full capacity and really getting full actualization of everything that we're doing is the next thing I see. You know, so one of the things that we were able to, we'd been looking at for 20 years was Manly Roadhouse in Manly, and you know, haven't really had a chance to do much with that at all. But we fly up there 5 days a week on our scheduled service, and it's great aurora viewing. So I think getting back and you know, maximizing the model. I think the one thing that we do want to do that will happen here is just a physical facility at the East Ramp that will kind of get us under one roof on the Right Air, Warbleau, and Northern Alaska Tour Company side. But I think we've got plenty to keep our hands full. And somebody was chuckling over there when they said the expansion, certainly not at a national level, but to make sure that we can do the things that we do at a capacity that is scalable and it makes sense. You know, like part of it is, you know, we were doing a lot of aurora excursions among both mainland China and domestic Chinese, and that went totally to zero. So we got to get that back. Got work to do at the camps and improving that. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity right in our realm, and I think that's going to keep our hands full.
Well, dude, that's an interesting point, though. I mean, geopolitical shifts can sometimes compromise, as we've seen with Russia and Ukraine, and that has repercussions. But China and Asia were an important part, as you say, of how do you build back in a market like that and reconnect with that?
Well, I mean, that's going to be working with, I mean, if there's going to be interface at a national level, it would be working through, say, the Alaska Travel Industry Association, who's going to work with the delegation to make sure that it is easy or at least possible for, say, you know, the China market for that travel to come back again, which it went away, and now there's other, you know, geopolitical factors that may come in as far as difficulty in getting visas or things like that. You know, the other way that we interface, and we don't so much, but the industry in general is J1 visa program. So it's made it very difficult for some of the cruise tour operators to operate to full capacity in Denali National Park. Because that was like 5 years ago, you'd go down there and, you know, most of your help is probably going to be from Eastern Europe, and there's issues going on there now. So who knows when that'll come back, but that ties into the whole human resource and getting help that we need.
Right. Well, finally, you personally, I know you've coached hockey. What's ahead for you?
Well, in coaching? Or?
Yeah, well, just coaching and outside of business.
Have you been talking to my wife? Yeah. Carrie, if you're listening, I know that this comes up frequently. So we don't have a specific transition plan. We still feel young and that we're still, you know, doing what we need to do, but we've been doing it for a long time. I think that over time we need to figure that out, but it isn't something that's at top of mind. We've got enough to do to keep us busy here for a few years, and we've got a deep enough bench to where I know that it's been kind of fun to see, and where I can see something in the future is of like supporting, like in Utqiagvik. So I'm here in Fairbanks, and I can disappoint people in 3 different areas, both Barrow, Fairbanks, and my home by being gone, but also kind of figuring, well, hey, things work if you're not there. So something will coagulate at some point on that. As far as coaching, like when I'm back here based more in Fairbanks, I want to start over with some little guys and start again at a mellow level. It took a lot of time, and that was about 20 years. So my son Simon, who's in the audience, when he started at about 5 years old, took him through as about 18 years old, and then took a little bit of time off after that. So got to start over with another batch. Not of my own kids.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much what I have for you, but we have people who have known you a long time, obviously, and are here to heckle. So I want to open up the questions from the audience. And because this is being taped and also webcast, I'll have to take your questions and kind of summarize them to ask Matt. But, well, there's Randy Zonke, so I knew there was something coming from Randy.
So you were very young when you started your business career.
Yes.
Do you hire a lot of high school kids for various things in your current operation? And then if so, do you try to foster them and bring them up and promote them through your business?
Yeah, certainly. So the kind of the place that a lot of times for insurance reasons, high school is a little bit tough. So that might be start with vehicle cleaning. And that one needs to be able to usually have at least a license to be able to get themselves into the wash facility in the evening time and clean all night long. And certainly though, that is something that we do foster when then somebody is now they're 19 before we can get on insurance for, like say, operating a van, which is kind of a core skill for guest service or things like that. And then going on from there. But there's a couple of good examples, I think, that worked with, so Tom Hewitt started as he's an editor with ADN now, right? So yeah, I can remember the first day he was doing night vehicle cleaning at our Marica Street location. I think he had a newspaper, so I think his problem was we use newspapers to clean the vehicles because it's great. It's got just abrasive enough, and then with certain material. And I'm pretty sure his first night, I came down and there was a newspaper next to him, and he was just zonked out, a puddle of drool from being up all night. But then he went on to work with us through vehicle cleaning, and then in guest service and reservations in the office, and look where he is now. And it wasn't because of him reading the newspaper at night and falling asleep on the table. But yeah, it's certainly as much as we can foster, we do that. Let's see, we have other guides that have gone on to go. So Aaron Lajewski that is with I think he's on the assembly now. He worked with us, and he's got a Aurora viewing business now and still helps us out, or if he needs a vehicle, we help out. So yeah, we try to keep people around as long as possible, for sure. High school, certainly from college, and we do a lot of recruiting here at the University of Alaska. Does that answer your question? Good one. Yes?
Yeah, what was it about your initial team of teenagers that worked so well? It was you and Brett, and who else was there?
Lee Keniston, and then there was Jeff Brown and Ben Roth. And one, we grew up together. And I think we all have similar backgrounds and weren't afraid of working ridiculously long hours and had fun doing it. So good chemistry there, and it's been kind of, and we get that sometimes. So Lee and Brett and I just have grown up together and have been able to, I think, dig in on areas that fit our personalities and skill sets, and have a super high trust relationship. So it's just never been an issue. But I think I've heard, but we do what we do, that that's unusual for either partnerships or a corporation, small corporation. And then they, so either one of these guys have, they're as much or more than myself, but I'm the one that's is out in front talking.
Touch on the role of the chocolate cake.
That is a legendary. So it starts.
So explain the chocolate cake.
So at the Arctic Circle, as you know, it's a spiritual experience to cross the Arctic Circle, and so it needs to have a celebratory aspect to it. So from the early days, the primordial days of Northern Alaska Tour Company, celebrating it at the Arctic Circle would include having chocolate cake, or tundra mud, as I monikered it, and that recipe came from Cam Carlson. But then there was a worldwide disappearance of mint chocolate chips, so we had to reinvent the recipe for that. So that Tundra mud still exists. It's baked at a commercial kitchen though at Yukon River Camp now. So yeah, thank you for, was that your recipe, Cam, or was that somebody else's?
Picked it up somewhere.
Probably off the back of a Jell-O box.
Go ahead.
I heard one of the questions asked was about how hockey and what you learned in hockey then transferred to being business ownership. And one of the things I heard is the teamwork. So when you were talking about the people and the relationships that work with you, I heard you use the word coworker multiple times, not employee, and that kind of experience that you have. And I'd like to know more about how you treated and the word coworker and how that goes into the rhythm of the people who come and work.
Yeah.
So let me just quickly, because some people might not have heard it.
Mm-hmm.
So you use the word coworker rather than employee, and what's the dynamics there? How is that working?
Well, that's something early on that, so vocabulary and lexicon is important. So if anybody's been around in the organization a long time, know that there's certain things that are, so we don't think of it as employees, it is coworkers. Nobody works for somebody else, they work with somebody else, and there is no they, there's us. We also like the term visitor industry versus tourist. So we try to have a vibe of that we're working together. So it can be a little bit difficult because we're not real hierarchical or anything like that. It's a very flat organization. And so it probably takes a little bit higher EQ and some things to figure out now, who am I supposed to talk to do this and all that, but it really works. And yeah, we feel very egalitarian, and we're super appreciative of everybody that is investing their time and talents to work with us. And that's just truly how it is. So, and we'll correct somebody if they're using the wrong vocabulary occasionally. But it comes from a genuine place, and that's been very effective. And hopefully it's been a good experience for a lot of our coworkers, both past and present. I know it can get a little frustrating for some of our aviation guys that are more strident or from a military background that there's chain of command and that kind of thing. So it exists, but there's definitely a team, family aspect to it that is very genuine.
That's a great question, because in a way I was trying to get to it. Is there, in physics they talk about a phase transition when like water freezes or when it sublimates off your roof, into vapor. Is there a point as you grow where you really have to consciously keep the dynamics the same, because with growth comes different set of people, with different assumptions? Does that make sense to you, Matt?
Yeah, I think so, and I don't know that we're there, because we ebb and flow, so kind of pandemic shrunk down a little bit, and we had to change roles somewhat, and we have a little bit different styles, so we're really lucky to have like Erica Weld, who's worked super hard, in accounting to help Lee, and so we're still trying to support functions, but then I'll be loading a plane on the ramp in Barrow 2 days ago, or answering phones directly to kind of model what we want to do. Or Brett even takes that to the next level of being on the ramp, building loads, or cooking breakfast at Coldfoot. So we're kind of up and down the scale, which makes it a little bit tough. And I think that I don't know that we'll be at a level where that's not required. Kathy Hedges, who's worked with us for years, our first marketing person, is in Healy at Ridgetop, operating vans and cleaning rooms there. So, we kind of have that ethic, and it's also a necessity of the times. And I've heard that throughout the industry too, just going back to, what the current environment is, that your key leaders and longtime experienced people are having to cover positions that you can't get anybody else to do. So, and that's always the case.
Yeah.
And we do want to support each other too, and that's always been the case for, having grace and maybe being able to put up with some things that you maybe wouldn't otherwise, but say with a seasonal coworker that isn't performing optimally, well, you know, it's easy for somebody to say, well, that kid's got to go. Well, okay, who's going to do that kid's job? Is it going to be you? No, it's going to be me. It's going to be Brett. It's going to be Lee. So sometimes we have a very patient attitude, but that's also out of a necessity.
Yeah.
We're very realistic, I think, on those things, to a level of frustration to some, but we're definitely purposeful about it.
Well, you must have a rhino hide now for frustration. I mean, when you build a business like you have to deal with the unexpected, so it has to be kind of...
Oh, it's not frustration. It's just the way it is. You know? Yeah, you definitely go into it. That there's the anticipatory anxiety is always worse than the real event. So just skip the anxiety part if you can, which is not possible all the time. But
Yeah, that's good advice. Anyone else? Well, Matt Atkinson, thank you so much for talking with us this evening.
well, thank you very much. And I did want to, I've been trying to be mindful about thanking everybody for coming out and everything, and didn't. And so Lee Keniston is here, and we have mentioned, name dropped, but Jerry and Janine Keniston have stored vans for us in Washington for at least the last 20 years. And he's got extended family members that have brought vans up and buses up from lower 48 or Louisiana and things like that. So that's just another example of the forest it takes to build a tall timber.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.